All right. Are all the members of the public settled? Perfect. All right. So we will get started. We'll call this meeting to order at 6 o'clock. We respect and recognize the First Nations within whose unceded lands the village of Kaslo is situated, including the Tanaka, the Sinixt, and the Silix people, and the Indigenous and Métis residents of our community. And just so the public knows, I'm on in transit on my way to meetings in Vancouver. So I'm chairing the meeting remotely, which is in our procedures bylaw that any members of council that have to participate electronically are able to do so. And it also allows that if the mayor is present, the community charter says that the mayor has to chair the meeting. And so here I am. So we have late additions to the agenda, and it is for 2 municipal grants that are added to the list that is in the agenda. So can I have a motion to adopt the agenda with the addition of the late items? Moved by Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor Leithwood. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, motion is carried. And the minutes of the February 25th council meeting and the March 4th committee of the whole meeting. If there are no errors or omissions, we'll move them both as a block. So did I see Councillor Brown and Councillor Bird? Any discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. We have no delegations this evening, and so we'll move into our information items. So first is my mayor's report, and along with a couple of documents. So one is the Celgar stakeholders call presentation. There hasn't been a meeting for quite a while as they were in a change of management. And so they just wanted to update people and let them know how they're dealing with the threat of tariffs and how it would impact their operations. And so, yeah. And then, so I am heading to LGLA. So I've provided the program for that. And then the following week, I will be in Montreal or Dorval for Federation of Canadian Municipalities meetings. So are there any questions on my report? Okay. Hearing none, are there any reports from members of council?
None at this time for myself.
No. All right. Okay, thank you. All right, so then we'll move into committee meeting minutes, and there's the draft minutes from the March 4th events committee. Did you want to speak to those at all, Councillor Leithwood?
Sure, through the chair. So we're planning on having a volunteer fair for the volunteer organizations. We just sent invitations out to quite a few volunteer organizations, and they're a mix of nonprofit and just organizations that support the community. So on April 12th, there will be a fair from 1 to 4, and groups are invited to have a table, and they can, so people can come and see the kind of organizations we have. I know that lots of them are always looking for board members and those kind of things. And then there'll be a dinner later on as an appreciation. And hopefully there'll be at least 1 or 2 representatives from each group. So we sent the letters out. We're hoping people will reply by the 21st. And who from your organization, there's a limit on how many people from each one, because the Legion is limited in size for the dinner. And if anybody online or here didn't get an invitation that belongs to an organization, let us know and we'll send you an invitation.
Thanks, Councillor Leithwood. And I also want to mention, we want to thank Alana Jenkins from the Chamber, who's been joining us for our meetings, and she's been assisting with obtaining email addresses and has put together a spreadsheet for us to track the organizations as they reply. So we appreciate her help with doing that. All right, and then we'll move it. We've got staff reports. CAO Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. A quick report. Active Transportation Network Plan, a draft has been received by village staff and reviewed, and a couple of adjustments made. And so this revised draft will be provided to council at your next regular meeting so that you can have a glimpse and offer your thoughts. And then a public open house is scheduled for April 1st at St. Andrew's Heritage Hall, open to the public, and certainly council is welcome to attend as well. And based on all of the feedback received from council and the public, the consultant will finalize the plan and then make a presentation to council near the end of April. Electrical permits, there were some deficiencies noted in various buildings, and we'll be looking to have those deficiencies corrected before the operating permits can be issued by Technical Safety BC. So there'll be requests for funding included either in the operating budget or as part of capital projects that council was presented with last week. So on the arena side in particular, when it came to mechanical, we would include the electrical upgrades within that work. So we'll highlight it for council at our next budget meeting as well. The last couple of weeks, staff have been busy with a couple of items. One is the audit that's performed annually by a third party to ensure there's no fraud or mistakes, and that our financial statements are in good shape. So that process will continue over the next month as staff continue to provide information to the auditors. And other work that staff have been working on that council is well aware of would be the draft 2025 budget. So we've had a meeting to discuss operating budget. We've had a meeting to discuss capital, and even touched on the asset program for the village. And we'll continue to take feedback from council and incorporate it into a draft budget that we're hoping to present to you in mid-April. One of the items that staff are aiming to present to council at your next meeting would be parcel taxes, sewer and water parcel taxes, to see if there's an adjustment that council would like to make with the rates that are being charged. The South Kaslo development plan is continuing to be worked on, and at your next council meeting, the engagement plan will be provided so that you can understand where council input can be received as part of the process, as well as where the public input is and kind of what the schedule is for the project. And the final item that's not actually on the printed sheet I gave you would be an update that staff's provided a few minutes ago with respect to inspections of commercial buildings by the fire department. And so we know that our fire chief for the Kaslo and Area D volunteer fire department resigned. And so while they're recruiting for that position, there's a fellow fire chief in a neighboring community who's going to pick up those inspection reports and hopefully bring them over the finish line. Thank you, Mayor Hewitt.
Thank you, CAO Baker. Are there any questions? Okay. Councillor Leithwood?
To the chair, are there deadlines for that, those electrical permit upgrades?
Through the chair, there's no deadline. We're not in compliance with the electrical code, and so we need to bring ourselves into compliance as soon as possible. If the contractor or staff felt like there was an immediate risk of public safety, then we would take immediate action. So we have some time, and bringing ourselves into compliance is going to require funding. So,
right. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you. So we will move into correspondence. We've got several items of correspondence. And letters of support that were sent out. A couple of them based upon resolution at last meeting. So are there any items that council wishes to raise? Councillor Brown.
I would like to raise two items, the letter from H. Bauer and the letter from Bill Wells, please.
Oh, Bear.
Bear.
Bear. Okay, so go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. So I admittedly don't know all of the details because we're just getting one side of the story in a letter that's sent to us. But I do have concern when citizens of Kaslo are denied access to a public facility for recreation. If Mr. Bear has indeed been denied access to this facility, which is publicly owned, then it would seem like I personally would like staff to communicate with the club about inclusion for all of Kaslo citizens who wish to recreate and are not contravening any rules or regulations around the court use, which may in fact be something that I'm unaware of. But in general, one's personal beliefs shouldn't prevent them from enjoying a public facility if they don't prevent others from enjoying that facility as well. So I do have concerns about his being specifically discluded from access to that public facility.
So perhaps CAO Baker and I could meet with members of the Racket Club. We have signed a lease with them and agreed that they were in charge of the operations of that, because we don't have recreation staff to be monitoring the operations ongoing. It wouldn't be feasible if we were to do that. The costs would be astronomical, but if that's something that you wish us to do,
I do indeed.
perhaps. Okay.
Yeah, as we fund that, I think that we have a role in that. So thank you.
All right, and your next item?
I believe Councillor Leithwood had something she'd like to say about that last item.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Councillor Leithwood.
To the chair. It is public property, but it is leased to the Racket Club. And so how their organization works is you pay a fee to be a member, like many other organizations have member fees, and that provides you access. But there is a membership fee that they use to pay for the insurance and the upkeep of the courts. So I think anyone can become a member, but someone has to pay for that lease payment and the upkeep and maintenance of the courts, and that's why we lease that area to the Racket Club.
Go ahead, Councillor Brown.
Through the chair. So my understanding was, based on the letter that we received, was that they, regardless of whether he were paying or not, were denying him access to that. So that was my understanding. I didn't see anything about they're not, I'm not willing to pay the fees, or they're not accepting my fees. So perhaps the letter doesn't tell the whole story. But there was nothing about membership fees or anything in there. The way that the letter came off was that he was wanting to use it and he was being told you're not actually allowed to use that. So whether that's because he's not paying fees or whether it's because of a personal issue, it wasn't clear to me based on that letter, and I wouldn't presume to understand the whole thing because we're only seeing half of it. But it didn't seem that it was fees based. It seemed more of a personal kind of thing. So yeah, if it were fees based, then that would be perfectly understandable. Everyone's got to adhere to all the rules that everyone else here adheres to. So thank you. And then the second.
Yep, go ahead.
The second item through the chair. So I haven't been sitting, Mr. Wells obviously has written to previous councils about this, and staff has addressed it in a short-term way and met with him based on his letters. So I guess I'd like to know, in light of the information that's being provided to the village about these flooding concerns, It's noted that the Village of Kaslo has met with him and other qualified individuals in the past to address some of those concerns in a short term. But what I'm wondering is what long-term solutions have been adopted to address this issue? If it has indeed been identified by the Village of Kaslo as an issue. And if it has been identified as an issue by the Village of Kaslo, then what long-term solutions are we prepared to put in place to address that flooding concern?
Okay, well, what I'm going to recommend is that we allow CAO Baker the time to look into the issue because it was mentioned during question period last time and now it's come to us officially. So I think we need to allow CAO Baker time to research and talk with with the public works staff. And because there could have been changeovers in staff since it was last addressed with the previous council. So rather than trying to make up stuff tonight, I think it's better to allow the CAO to do some research and come back to a future meeting.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Were there any other items? Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, I was also wanting to raise the letters from Bill Wells regarding flooding on Arena Avenue. And my thought is, since that area of flooding is above the whole south, Kaslo South area, which is under being the Barefoot Consulting is now doing a planning exercise on that piece of land that we should at the very least provide to Barefoot Consulting all of the correspondence from Bill Wells, and I think ideally put them in touch to talk together because that makes sense to me.
All right. So is that okay with you, CAO Baker, to leave that with you and the point that Councillor Bird raised about sharing that with Barefoot?
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So I think the best approach certainly would be to make Barefoot Consulting aware. And further to that, if we're successful with our application for funding for flood mitigation, then staff are intending to have this area included as an area of concern.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Okay, were there any other items? All right, so then we'll move on. So there was a letter of support for the Langham and the outgoing correspondence regarding the Zinkton proposal. And then there is the copy of the public notice regarding the closure on, can't remember what the name of that, not 6th Street, but the closure up by the school. And that's just for information. So that brings us to question period. I'll go online first. Steve, did you have any question at all? Or Valley Voice?
None from the Valley Voice, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Steve, if you have any questions, you can unmute. Okay, I see you've unmuted. Did you have a question, Steve? I can't hear anything. So are there any questions in the room, Councillor Brown?
Yes, Jim Holland has his hand raised.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
So, our question regards something that's in the OCP that's been sort of lying dormant there for, I believe it was brought into effect in the OCP review that was having when I was there. I believe Erica and was also involved in that. I think it's important and topical that it not be ignored anymore. It's in the section 9 parks and natural areas. Under section 9.4 3 policy. It's number 9. It says the village will require a minimum 7-meter public access strip along all waterfront areas at the time of subdivision through the subdivision bylaw. And that's not necessarily 7 meters, it's a minimum of 7 meters. I think, given a lot of what's going on in water tower now, if you're going to go ahead and get that into the subdivision bylaw, I see it's one of your priority, council priorities. So I guess my question is, can council assure us that section that's sort of buried in the OCP be brought up and made clear to the public or anyone that's doing it in the subdivision and as well from that water requirement for public access? Sure.
CAO Baker, can I give you that question? Because I only heard parts of it. So if there's any other questions, maybe we'll have the speaker move closer to the table. So because the backs, it's a little awkward to hear. I heard parts of it, the question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Hewitt. If I understand correctly, it's looking to make sure the public and any developers are well aware that when there's development on the waterfront, that at least 7 meters of land is, I believe was made available for public use. And so that would occur at the time of subdivision. And so in response, perhaps I would leave it with council to provide any direction to staff that it wants to see in the way of public education or information.
I think it was in the zoning bylaw that we covered it.
You can respond, CAO Baker. Again, because I couldn't really hear what the response was from Jim.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
I believe my question was, or I thought it would be accurate just to do that in subdivision. Mainly because going through a 40-page document in OCP and you find something like that, it's really different. So just getting it into the zoning bylaw with your update review that you're doing probably this year, I think personally it'll be quite adequate. And to just publicize that might be a waste of the resources because 90% of people read that wouldn't apply to them. So getting it in the zoning bylaw, that would in my mind would be the most efficient way to do it.
And I did hear, yeah, I did hear that, but the zoning bylaw is on a work plan for this year, I believe. If CAO Baker?
Thank you, Mayor. The review of the zoning bylaw, as well as the subdivision servicing bylaw, they're both on the council's strategic priorities. So when it comes time, staff can take a look at how that part of the OCP might relate to either one of those bylaws.
All right. Steve, did you have a question now? No? Okay. Because I see you're unmuted. At least it looks like you are. Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions in the room? Okay. So then we will move into business. So our first item is revised meeting schedule. So the recommendation is that the 2025 council meeting schedule be revised as detailed in the staff report titled 2025 council meeting schedule revised, dated February 26, 2025. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? Councillor Bird?
Through the chair. So this, the purpose of this amendment here is to take, we had a May 6th committee of the whole meeting scheduled to discuss permissive tax exemptions. And the purpose of this motion is to not to no longer look at permissive tax exemption, but to include it as part of the regular council meeting. And I still think that's exactly the sort of thing that should be in a committee of the whole. Along with, grants and aid policy, which we have been wanting to revise for a couple of years now, and I think the two of them together would make a nice little committee of the whole package, which could be the regular council meeting, but I think it is better dealt with in the fashion of a, it's easier pre-discussion committee of the whole formatting. So I'll vote for this resolution to nix that May 6th committee of the whole meeting, but I really strongly feel that we have to not forget to include a review of the permissive tax exemptions and our grants and aid policy, which we don't actually have a grants and aid policy, that should get put on an agenda pretty soon. And I don't mind if it's a standalone committee of the whole meeting, but I just don't want it dropped.
No, we just have to look at another date in the schedule, and the permissive tax exemption isn't time sensitive. It was being put on now because there looked like a slot, but turns out there isn't. And I don't think there was any indication that I could see in the report that it was just going to be discussed at a regular council meeting. I think it would still be scheduled as a committee of the whole meeting. And I agree, we had discussed having the grant and aid policy discussed and perhaps amended, because we did have issues with it over the past year. CEO Baker, did you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. Just to clarify that permissive tax exemptions, I believe the deadline for their approval is in October, end of October. And so there's no need to rush a discussion on permissive tax exemptions and perhaps a policy. We have months. And with respect to grants and aid, staff will make a note that council's interested in reviewing that. And we'll see if there's time to include it along with the permissive tax exemption.
All right, so CEO Baker and I can look at the schedule when we next meet and come up with some potential dates for that meeting. I think we want to get through budget first. All right, so any further discussion on that item? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, that motion is carried. Next item is the 2025 Logger Sports Event of Significance. So the recommendation is. Oh. Okay. Okay, so I'm assuming Councillor Leithwood is declaring a conflict of interest, and that's why she's left the room?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't hear it, but I saw her get up. All right. So this is to consider the request from the Kaslo and District Arena Association to declare 2025 Logger Sports an event of municipal event of significance for the purposes of their special event permit application to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. Recommendation is that the 2025 Logger Sports be declared a municipal event of significance for the purpose of the Kaslo and District Arena Association's special event permit application to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? Okay, Councillor Brown?
Through the chair. So I believe it was noted that this is something that's going to come to council every year. Is there an ability for us to declare this an event of significance for a longer period of time? Or is this something where yearly we will continually have to make this declaration?
Maybe, well, I don't know whether that would happen because it's possible that the liquor licensing requirements may change. And if we put in in a rule that says that they automatically get it, maybe we don't ensure that they're complying with everything in the regulations. But CO Baker, did you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. Perhaps the best way to do it would be through a policy. And given staff's current time constraints, it would not hit the priority list for some time.
Okay. So any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay. That motion is carried. Next, oh, well, yep, before I go on. Thank you, Councillor Bird. Right, next item is the 2025 municipal grants. So there was a recommendation in the package, and so there were two that were back on the list because they've now been deemed to be eligible, that weren't on the staff report. So that was the Kaslo Kootenay Lake Independent School Society and the car show. So if council accepts them, then so the applications totaled 4,299. And if we added those in, CO Baker, they were $500 each.
Yes, Mayor Hewitt, that is correct.
Okay. All right, so that would make it $52.99, and we had budgeted $7,500 for the year. So the question is whether we grant these 100% and then just leave the balance, which $52.99, so $2,100 and change left for the balance for fall or for occurrences as they arise during the rest of the year, or we prorate and do half and half. So if we say $37.50 now, $37.50 later. So any thoughts from council members? Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, I would be in support of leaving that excess for the fall intake.
Okay, so granting all of these, the ones that are in the staff report, plus the two late ones, or not late, but the ones that submitted their reports late and are now eligible. Okay.
Correct.
So you want to make that motion then to approve the items in the staff report, as well as Kootenay Lake Independent School Society and the car show.
Yes, through the chair, I would move that all eligible applicants for the 2025 municipal grants be awarded the full amount of their requests.
I'll second.
Okay. Second by Councillor Leithwood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. Right. And the EDMA Indigenous Engagement Requirements. Maybe I'll let CAO Baker speak to this one before I read the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So, as you've read in the report, $40,000 was provided to the village by the province in 2024, and that funding needs to be used. The regional district has asked for all of that $40,000 to go towards regional collaboration, whereas the village has projects that are outside the scope of the agreement with the regional district that would also benefit from Indigenous engagement and allow us to ensure we build a relationship with the Indigenous communities. And so determining how much the village should retain and how much should be provided to the regional district is difficult because the scope of engagement with the RDCK has not been well defined. We don't know exactly what we would get. An RFP hasn't been issued, quotes haven't been received or bids. And so based on previous collaboration with the regional district, including the housing needs report that was recently performed, in which the village provided about $5,500. Staff believe, in their professional opinion, that $15,000 is adequate for regional collaboration with respect to the Emergency Management or Emergency Disaster Management Act, and that the remaining $25,000 can be put to good use for projects that directly affect the village, like our flood mitigation plan and source water protection plans, as well as Fire Smart. So the recommendation reflects my commentary.
Okay. Thank you, CAO Baker. Are there any questions before I read the recommendation? All right. So the recommendation is that the village enter into a memorandum of understanding with the RDCK to collaborate on Indigenous engagement activities, and further that $15,000 be transferred to the RDCK for the purpose of the RDCK managing pooled Indigenous engagement funds on behalf of participating municipalities and meeting the engagement required under the Emergency and Disaster Management Act. Oh, Councillor Bird, question? Or
Well, I'll move this motion for discussion because I do have
Okay.
things I'd like to speak
okay,
about.
moved by
Second.
okay, moved and seconded. Go ahead, Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, I did look through this MOU, which I appreciate is a draft and will get adjusted in light of however we vote on this particular resolution. So I'm reading right straight. The municipality will. So this is we're talking a memorandum of understanding, and this is in the MOU. It's saying that we will provide input to hired consultant on individual and municipalities' needs. I don't even understand the sentence. So that's in 6. It also says the agreement to transfer all of the 2024 Indigenous engagement funding, so the 40,000. So that would have to be, it's an obvious one that needs to be fixed, but yeah, and in 7, the funding portion of 7, it says we're committing to give them $40,000 on or before February 21st, 2025. So I'm assuming that if we are agreeing to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the RDCK, that we'll go through this MOU properly and make sure that all these little, some of them are, obviously major, like where the funding is assumed to be 40,000 and we're offering 15,000. And some kind of clarification for the municipality will provide input to hire consultant on individual municipalities' needs, which is a sentence that does not really make sense. But that's my comment.
Okay. CEO Baker, did you have a response?
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So the intent of providing this MOU was simply to provide context and maybe a bit more information that's not provided in the staff report. The MOU that gets signed would be reflective of the amount that council decides to allocate, and staff can ask for clarification regarding the points that Councillor Bird has made before entering into an agreement.
Okay, did you have a supplemental, Counselor Byrd?
No, I did not.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, that motion is carried. And we have no additional late items. So the recommendation that is that in accordance with section 91A of the part of the council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to one or more of the following. G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality. E, acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality, and that persons other than council members and municipal officers be excluded from the meeting. Moved by Councillor Leithwood, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favor? That motion is carried. So we're in recess at 6:41.